Hey guys, again, my name is Dennis Baker, Life Raft Program Director. Thank you for all coming out. Thank you for those viewing on the live stream. A special shout out to a panelist mother who's watching in New Jersey right now. That's always just sweet. So Ace's mom in New Jersey. Couple things we want to share with you guys as well as the people viewing is that we are social media conscious. That means we're on things like Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Vine, the whole 9 yard. So look for us because sometimes we share information you want to know about signing up for an event before the email goes out. Because as you all know, when the email goes out, those events fill up super fast. So twitter.com/SAG Foundation, facebook.com/SAG Foundation, you figure out where I'm going with this. Follow us, like us. The big one is the YouTube channel because all events we're trying to record as much as possible and archive those. So this event tonight is being live streamed. As soon as the event is over, it's up on our YouTube page. Like that. It is that fast. So, one, you can watch the live streams from there, but two, you can go home as soon as it's over and like, oh, I missed something they said, I didn't write it down, and you can find that spot and rewatch it. We ask that you share it out. If there's something you really liked, put it on Twitter, say thank you, do the quote. We asked you after the event, not during the event. But things like that helps what the video said, get the word out, and get more people knowing. I had a moderator one time who's been here for 40 years and didn't know about the SAG Foundation. Been a SAG-AFTRA member for 40 years and didn't know about the SAG Foundation. So we're trying to get the word out as much as possible. And we need your help. And part of that is because this place is your place. We're here for you guys. So part of thinking about that is we are function on grants and donations. We do not get your dues. We do not get your initiation fees. Let me repeat that. We do not get your dues. We do not get your initiation fees. Please pass that around. We simply function on grants and donations. So, a way to think about that is every seat for every event we do costs us $14 between staff and everything like that. So depending on how many events you go, maybe $5 a month donating online, throwing $5 cash in a basket when we have it, helps us create more events. Every time the surveys go in that I tell you to fill out, one thing that they always say is more CAP events. Who wants more CAP events? Show your hands. Yep. Everyone wants more CAP events because they need to be staffed. And it's a small 20-number class. So more staff means more events, means more CAP events. You see how kind of the math works that way? So think about it that way. If you can throw $5 in, you can donate $5 a month online, it will go a long way to creating more events for you guys. And it's full circle. Also, we do financial assistance. If you're in need of financial assistance to help pay for bills, or you know a SAG-AFTRA member who is, call the office and there's ways of getting that to happen. Also, when you donate, it goes to that as well. So by donating $5, you might be helping the union member next to you pay that phone bill to be able to keep going. All right, makes sense for everyone. Thank you for coming. I want to get started because this is so much great information that's going to be shared tonight. So our moderator is from FIND, which is Film Independent. I almost blanked there, Film Independent, and her name's Kelly Thomas. Give her a hand.
Hi, and welcome. Thank you all for being here tonight, and thank you to our panelists. My name's Kelly Thomas, and I am the producer in residence at Film Independent. Film Independent is a nonprofit arts organization. We are known primarily for producing the Los Angeles Film Festival, as well as the Independent Spirit Awards. However, we do have another big secret, ongoing educational and filmmaker programs throughout the year. And one of my duties is to help run the Artist Development Department, which has workshops for writers, directors, producers, documentarians, and we have labs and educational events, and I'm on staff to help those fellows who go through our programs bring their projects to fruition. I'm also an independent producer, and I've worked in features, I've developed TV, and I just finished a foray into the branded entertainment realm, which was really interesting. So without further ado, I want to have all the panelists introduce them to you.
Thanks, Kelly. I wanted to thank Kelly and Dennis for inviting me. I actually didn't know about the SAG Foundation, so I'm super excited to be here. And after watching that promo, I'm wondering why producers don't have a foundation too. I think we need one, especially the financial assistance part. But I am an independent film producer. I've spent most of my career in New York City. I've produced 10 features in 10 years. And I've recently started to branch out a little bit and produce, I produced an iPad app and a couple museum installations last year. I also started a distribution company based on the features that I self-distributed. Now I have a company that distributes uncensored independent films from mainland China to North America. And I've worked a lot with Film Independent, actually working with them right now on the New York Times Indie Online Film Festival. So yeah, I'm excited to continue the collaboration. Thanks again for having me. Oh, my name is Karin. Sorry, I forgot that important part. Karin Chien.
Hi, my name is Nina Leidersdorff. I am a Danish producer. I have worked in the Danish industry for about 10 years before I came here. I've been here for 10 years. I produced 3 features so far. I'm getting into the 4th. I've done a lot of TV and commercials and stuff like that. Originally, I came from documentaries, which I still really love to do. But I've been moving more and more into to fiction lately. So that's where my main focus is right now. Thanks. And thanks for inviting me to this program.
Yeah, to piggyback on that, thanks, Dennis and SAG Foundation. My name is Ace Marerro, and I represent you guys. 3 years ago, I took my own, or I attended my own producing panel, sat right there. It's a good seat. And I took away so much information from that and the panels to come, and about 2 months later, I had an opportunity to jump on a project as a producer myself, and it's been, you know, I haven't looked back really. I've been busy as an actor producer. So when Dennis reached out, you know, to have me come and speak, I was beyond honored, but just excited to share with you guys and hopefully, you know, have something you guys can take away like I did from being here. Thanks again.
Hi, I'm Kate Rowan. Thank you, Dennis and Kelly. Thanks for having me, you guys. I am from Los Angeles. I'm an independent film producer. I went to UCLA Graduate School. I've worked for Sundance producing panels and also for Film Independent. My most recent feature is a documentary film called Birth Story that's out now. Yeah, Ina May Gaskin. That won the Los Angeles Film Festival in 2012, and I produce short form social issue pieces as well as narrative. I've done a couple documentaries, not a narrative feature yet, but I have one that I'm hoping goes in September and others in development. And I'm mainly focused on short form right now because it is paying my bills.
Thank you, guys. So I thought I would start off by just maybe laying some ground rules about the topic, because producing could be a whole, 4-year course in some program. But a lot of people come to me and say, how do I find money for my project? Let's not go there. Let's do more of the kind of the 101s. Like, let's assume that we have some money, you have your material, you're ready to go. And that's, so I would like to focus on those kind of nuts and bolts and the steps that are involved, because I think many people don't really understand what producing entails. I certainly didn't when I came out here and started. So it was baptism by fire. And I think you talk to any independent producer and we all have different ideas of what the major do's and don'ts are. So it will be great to hear everyone's input on that. So I thought I'd start off by asking, in pre-production, so let's say there are 3 major phases. There's pre-production, production, and post-production. Then there's distribution. That's a whole separate ball of wax. But let's say pre-production, what are the major things that you want to keep in mind? And I know several of you are in prep right now, so what's keeping you awake at night? Anybody want to start? We can start off with just the things that you feel like you have to line up in pre-production to get your foundation going.
What is stressing me out right now? Okay, what is stressing me out right now? We need to have enough money to finish, but if we wait until we have enough money, we might never start. So I'm trying to work out different budgets and shooting schedules based on what we have and what we might get. And one scenario, for example, is we have 1/3 of what we need to finish, So we restructure the shoot based on everything that we can do with a crew of 6 people, a camera, and a few actors, and a bunch of free locations. And then we end with the larger scenes. So we're starting a crowdfunding that's going to go live September 1st. We have a third of the budget in place. Depending on what we get from that crowdfunding and what we get from product placement, those we'll have to make our hard costs match whatever number that is, because we don't want to wait. We want to do it this year. So that, and getting the script in shape, which I think a table read is a great thing to make sure that it flows all the way through and there aren't any glaring developmental issues, because you focus so hard on getting the money and moving forward that, you know, the development can fall away, but it shouldn't. You have to keep, and you have to rewrite also based on your budget. So that's my answer.
That's a lot.
I like that you said, assume we already have the money, because for me, that was sort of my experience. When I came to the project, the money was already on board. So I guess from my perspective, as an actor, it's always about the script, right? It's always about what's on the page. You know, if a good script's going to get made, that's always what I was told and what I've seen happen. So strengthening, like she said, you know, during table reads or whatever it is, you know, getting that story and structure and everything sound. And in our case, our first film, Madison County, was a much bigger film in its original form. Compared to what we made. So there was a lot of adjusting the script to sort of work around locations and budget. You know, that was a big thing to work with what we had. Social media, that was huge. That was, early on, that was sort of my strength, I would say, because as an actor, you know, we all have to know how to market ourselves and you know, book our own work, right? You know, and just be resourceful. So I just brought a lot of those things to the table and just, I figured, you know, if we want this film to be seen, we should create a fan base. And it was a horror film, so there's a big fan base already built in, right? And our director wanted to shoot a scene from one of his favorite movies, just sort of as a warm-up, because he hadn't been behind the camera in a while. And I had this idea to shoot a promo trailer for the film, just to give the film some sort of visual reference. And I wrote something, and he adapted it and, you know, incorporated more of what our movie was. And we shot that thing for like $150. And off of that, we ended up doing several deals that were offered to us based off of that. You know, like just, it was picked up by the horror websites, and we were tracking so highly before we'd ever rolled a single frame on the film, just because we had a presence and we had something that people can embrace and just watch. You know, our attention spans are shorter, and we have so many things going, you know, coming at us now that it really helped us. And so pre-production for me was a lot of raising awareness, structuring, making sure we had the strongest story possible, and then of course finding the cast and crew, obviously, to supplement that and to really bring it all together.
I think the best example I can come with for pre-production is my first feature I did was called The Story of Luke, and it took me 5 years to get it off the ground. So until the financing and everything was ready. The most important thing, and one of the reasons, which is not only the financial side, for me to get it off the ground, was to find the right people, the right team, which I think is key. And it doesn't matter if it's the most experienced or less experienced, it's really who has the same, you know, who falls in love with the project the way that you do. And can you share the vision with your main team, with your director and with the producers and whoever, the DP, whoever gets on board. And it goes all the way from the main team and all the way, trickles all the way down, that everybody is in love with the project. And it doesn't have to be a project that's the size of Story of Luke, which ended up being a union shoot. It can also be, I did a web series called Untitled Fiction Project, which was done for literally nothing, with a group of actors from Gloria Gifford's acting school, and they were so nice to say yes to participate with us, and it was basically just me producing and the director directing and shooting and doing everything himself. And we had so much fun with that, but at the very first thing was really to get people on board, your main people, your actors, and everybody that, you know, really where you feel you're on the same page with the project.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would echo a lot of what's been said. You know, I think pre-production for me means a very specific time frame. You know, there's the whole process of writing the script and raising the money and attaching your key actors, and that's usually called development. And pre-production is specifically the 6 to 10 weeks on an indie film. It could be 6 months on a studio film, but it's the 6 to 10 weeks that precedes the start of principal photography. So once you're in pre-production, usually means you've opened a production office, your line producer has started on the clock, you know, and things function according to a timetable. You know, certain things happen exactly on time in pre-production, like the table read comes the week before, or the tech scout comes 2 or 3 days before you start shooting, that kind of thing. So as a producer, a lot of times once you hire the department heads, they just get to work and they execute these things on schedule. So what you do as a producer sometimes feels a little amorphous. And I would say as a producer, the things I try to focus on in pre-production is, one, making sure all the financing is working, meaning the investors are happy, the paperwork is getting in place, the cash flow, the money's coming into the bank and it's getting to the production bank account. So that's working with your lawyer usually, and working directly with the investors, and you know, working with your bank account manager. And if you don't have, you know, I used to have a rule, like all the money had to be in place to get me through post-production before I would start, you know, this 8-week process of pre-production. And on one film we were shooting in the Middle East, and it was really volatile there, so I had to break that rule, and I modified it so it's like, okay, I won't start this week unless I know I can make payroll for the coming week, right? Because in film you usually pay before the week finishes. So I had little rules for myself like that in terms of cash flow. The second thing I would say I try to focus on is the casting, right? I mean, you guys know this, but producers really believe that, you know, 90% of the film is made with the cast. So who you cast for every single role really matters, and it matters not just for, you know, the best possible execution of the story, but it matters also for the sale of the film in the back end. And so sometimes you're casting, you know, in direct collaboration with your foreign sales agent, you know, or with your financier. They may have a list of who's approved, and maybe you could get, you know, the unknown lead actor that you want if you slide in a couple cameos, for example. Or, you know, there's a film that we did where they let us go with less known principal actors, but we brought in Kylie Minogue for a day to do a supporting character. And Kylie is not huge here, but she's one of the biggest stars in Europe. So we know that increases the foreign sales value. And, you know, that also means as a producer, it's like finding the right casting director for the director to collaborate with. Setting up that relationship, you know, budgeting in rehearsal if that's needed, or no rehearsal if the director doesn't want that. And the last thing I would say is what Nina said, which is putting your team together. You know, that the producer most of the time will sit in on the interviews with the cinematographer, with the editor, the production designer, the line producer. And I think, yeah, so mostly those, and the first AD. So I'd say those 5 positions. And that matters a lot. The films I produce are mostly with first-time directors, so it's really key to surround that person with a strong team, and also a team that director, you can see if they can communicate well in the interviews. You can see if there's going to be some resistance or, you know, ego problem down the line. And so what you're really trying to do is you're really trying to make the film in pre-production. You know, you're trying to prevent any things that can come up in production, right? Because all kinds of crazy scenarios come up in production that you can't plan for. So you at least try to troubleshoot the things that you can plan for, you know, bringing on the right team. And, you know, one thing I'll share is a very common rookie producer mistake when you're putting your team together is to hire people based on their credits. And it's very easy to be persuaded, you know, or kind of get seduced by someone who has really well-known credits. So this person worked on Beasts of the Southern Wild. But, you know, once you produce a few movies, you realize those credits actually don't mean very much, unfortunately. So the best way to find out if someone is good at their job is to pick up the phone and call the last 3 producers and last 3 directors that person worked with. So as a producer, I always do that. I only hire if the referral is good, chemistry with the director is good, and the person, you know, that key crew position seems willing to play ball with the kind of budget and schedule that we have.
Those are great. Thank you. And I was struck, partly I'm remembering one thing that Karin said at a Film Independent workshop once, which was about building your audience from the beginning, which Ace reminded me of. And I know in the beginning I said, oh, distribution is its own ball of wax. It is, but I do think in this day and age, it's super important to have an understanding of your social media presence, et cetera, from the beginning. And since you brought that up, Ace, and I know that Karin has a distribution company and thinks about this very strategically, I wondered if you guys could talk about that and how that works in the very beginning.
Well, actually, I can tell you from the story of Luke, which is about a young man with autism. When we developed the script, we went out to a couple of research universities and talked to some professors there, and had them read the script and basically had them sort of proofread or greenlit it for us. Of course, it's fiction, but it was still based on a true story, and we wanted it to have a feel that was real, and we didn't want to make a new Rain Man, and we didn't want to make it too dramatic or dark. So in that sense, we went out there. Then we went out to the organizations, we talked to them, we created awareness about the project, and basically all those seeds that we made during pre-production was something that we utilized when we were in post-production. We got back to them, all the organizations, all the different people that had helped us during the research when we were in production, and we kept updating along the way while we were shooting. We made little interviews, we put it up online on our website and so forth. And when we came to post and was about to launch the movie, we reached out again and asked the organization, in particular Autism Speaks, which is the biggest organization in this country, to help us create awareness, and they did. And they've been extremely helpful, and I'm pretty sure they are the main reason why our online sales has been going really well, is because of that. But that has been a couple of years in the pipeline, talking to them and becoming eventually really good friends with a bunch of those people around the country, and helped the film tremendously.
My turn. Well, on Birth Story, specifically, the directors decided to make an uncensored film, which means showing childbirth, which is not done in mainstream media from the lower region. So we knew that our distribution opportunities were going to be super, super limited. And, you know, as a producer, you have a responsibility to whoever is financing your film to make their money back so that you can go on to make your next film. So we needed to grow our awareness right away, and then we also wanted to see how mobile our audience, you know, were going to be. So Ina May Gaskin is the main character in our story. She has, you know, she's all about natural childbirth. She has a book called Spiritual Midwifery. Many women who are pregnant today will read her book. So we knew she had a following. We had to access them. So we signed up on Facebook. We had 15,000 fans very, very quickly. But also there's studies, you know, the click-through. Like you can have a Facebook fan, but it takes 10 of those fans to make a sale. So there are certain statistics like that that you should be aware of, because as you're growing your social media community, you want to get their actual email addresses. So you do newsletters and contests and things to grow your email list, all for preparation for when it comes time to distribute your film, that people actually buy your film. Because we knew that we were going to hold back a lot of rights on our film. We probably wouldn't get broadcast. It was doubtful we would get theatrical, but we ended up booking theatrical. We have a whole hybrid distribution approach, which I won't bore you with now, but I'm happy to answer the question, or you can email me. But we ended up going to 20 cities. We sold out every single theater. We had, you know, 150 community screenings, but we had to find a way to book all of that without substantial costs and keep our budget low so that we could make our money back. And we were also not being paid. It was a very small crew of people, and we worked for free the whole time, and it took 3.5 years. So you also, you know, there's fits and starts, and it's documentary, and you have to have another job sometimes and then focus on it full time. But that social media presence and growing that audience is critical to the success of a film and getting the word out, at least in documentary.
Yeah, to add to that, I sort of touched on some earlier how our social media presence really benefited us early on. And even adding to that, something you said made me remember this, but we had a few investors that we had apparently reached out to who were just sort of on the fence for our first film. And funny thing was, as we had been, going through production and tracking highly and getting all these, websites covering us and whatnot, it piqued their interest again. Like they wanted to come back in and throw their hat in, or their name in the hat. And for us, we realized it wasn't really going to make a difference. We were still going to be in the same sort of budget range, and we didn't want to have, we didn't need it. We didn't need the money. It was simply what it came down to. But we held their interest, and they essentially were the people that funded our next film. So it was all through the awareness that we raised for the film, and they liked that we were on these websites for this genre and all these great things. Another thing is that myself and the writer-director were very present on social media, and a lot of my closest friends give me a hard time for always being promoting our stuff, but it helps, and it made a difference. And when it came time to sell the film, like I said, we had people reaching out to us before we rolled frame, and that was because we were promoting the film and we were getting the word out there, and the sites, one site would cover us, and I realized that another site would just copy what they pasted, so I would reach out to those sites and say, hey, next time do you want an exclusive? And I can reach out to them directly, and now it was sort of an evolving process of figuring it all out, but just kind of using common sense. And when it came time to distribute the film, the distribution company that we ended up going with loved the idea that we were as present as we were, that we'd had the presence out there, and that as filmmakers we were accessible, and we would have contests and all these little giveaways, and we had no money to do this with. It was like, if you could point this out, you could get a free T-shirt, and it's like that was a lot of money for us, but nothing in the grand scape, the bigger picture, but. That was something that was a big benefit for us to have, and the distributors loved that, and they were like, we're going to have you take over our Facebook page and do all these great things, and you guys can be the face for sort of the film, but also this channel of our social media. That didn't happen, unfortunately. It's one of the many things that don't happen that distributors say, but that's a different panel. But what was great for us, and it was sort of a shell-shocking thing to sort of embrace, was we're sort of at the beginning of that curve, being filmmakers that are doing this and being present in all these great things. When it came time to sell our next film, that sort of just became the norm. Everybody's assuming, whereas they like that we're bringing that to the table, now they're like, and you're going to do this, and you're going to do that, and we're like, well, we can't even use that anymore as like a perk that we bring, with our film, as us on board. So it's changing, everybody's embracing social media, and you have to do it, and it's free. You know what I mean? It's free ways for us to market it. It's a lot of work, I'm sure you guys realize that by now, but it's one of the many tools that we have available that pave the way for filmmakers like myself and so many others that have little money to do, a lot, I guess, in so many ways.
I'll just add, I would say, it's a great question about audience, because I would say audience is the silver bullet right now. Like if you can grow your audience, or you have an audience, you can bypass everything else that independent producers used to have to go through, which is finders, investors, distributors, festival programmers, buyers, bookers. Because if you have your audience, you can go to your audience for funding. That's what Kickstarter is. Kickstarter is not only going to your audience for funding like Spike Lee does, or Veronica Mars, but it's building an audience for the future. You're inviting your audience to participate in the making of your film, and with audience, you don't need a distributor. You can put your film on your website like Louis C.K. did, and then make so much money that you donate 20% of it, and then you increase your crew salaries retroactively, all these kind of things that are pretty awesome. So audience is really, really important. That said, the tools to build audience are so new, right? YouTube was started in 2006, Twitter even later than that. And I work on character-driven independent dramas, which is the hardest things to sell. And some of them are even foreign language, which is, forget about it. You're just not going to sell that movie. And what I found is the directors who work in this space, they kind of think of themselves as auteurs. And you know what? Hell is going to freeze over before they send a tweet. They will never tweet, even if the sale of the film depended on it. It's just not going to happen. So, for these directors, I don't sit there and I say, you have to get on Facebook, you have to get on Twitter. It's not going to do any of us any good. But if I work with a director who is really social media savvy, does it make my job easier? Yes, absolutely, it does. But that's not going to be a reason I don't believe in and take on a story or a project. So if you have that skills, and even if you don't, if you're willing to just kind of take a risk and put yourself out there and develop those skills, it will end up serving you in the long run. But audience is absolutely key, and we can see, we can look at the people who are at least 20 years younger than me, and see how they're growing their audience through their YouTube channel, through their Kickstarter campaigns. Look at the people on Kickstarter who have, after Spike Lee, Veronica Mars, and Zach Braff, look at the people who have raised the most money on there. And those are the people who have built, followings of tens of millions of people on YouTube. You've never heard of them, but they are the ones, they are the independent filmmakers of today. Yeah.
Thanks. So I want to make sure we have time for all the different phases. So I'm going to assume that we are cash flowed and we have all our papers signed and locations locked and actors ready to go, rehearsed. So in production, so it's happening, 6 a.m. call time. What are the things that you're focusing on for that first day of the shoot?
I'll just start since someone else's, but something you said that just sort of gave me an internal chuckle is that, everything's all set and in place. I want to work on that set.
Yes.
I don't know
Imaginary
that.
film.
I don't know that world, and if so, I need to figure it out. But because that's never been the case for at least even as an actor. Forget producing. No set I've been on has been that smooth from my experience. It always seems like there's something that people are trying to figure out, right? But for that first day. First of all, everybody, and I love what you said about finding the team, right? And that's important, I think, is especially on a lower budget film, is having people that are just as passionate as you, if not, more, if that's possible, because that goes a long way. It's long hours, it's a lot of unglorified, not pretty stuff. You know what I mean? We had our producing team, our director. There were 13 of us in a 2-bedroom room. Of just our production team, because we're like, well, we got to have the actors, good accommodations and stuff. And I mean, that's not pretty, you're doing that for a month. So spirits, having people that are positive, it goes a long way. And I think that first day, everybody seems really excited, and you're trying to figure out what's going to happen. And it's, for me, it was keeping, making sure everything was lined up and ready to go, and making sure that the director was happy, but also focused, and then he had everything that he needed. And even our first day, we're shooting at a location that somebody was like, we're shooting in the South, and he had access to all these locations, and over there it was a little different. They're like, oh yeah, just go shoot if you want at the junkyard. And we're like, all right, well, I guess we're gonna shoot in this junkyard. And then a guy pulls up, 3 hours in the middle of our scene, and he's like, this is my junkyard. And so yeah, it's like, who are you, And I'm like, you better go talk to him. You're from here, not me. So, you always have to be on your toes and be ready to roll. There are going to be millions of things that can and will happen. But that first day always is just fun. It always seems like that. You always have a lighter day. I think that's always what people try to do, keep it a lighter day to film, so you feel like you accomplished, like you start off on a good foot. You don't want to have this overbearing, 15 page schedule that you have to shoot out in the first day, and you feel like you're running uphill the whole time. So I think keeping morale positive and sort of using those techniques to sort of keep things just everyone in good spirits goes a long way, because you have a long shoot ahead of yourself.
I think it's very important, exactly what you say, to keep the first couple of days lighter, because especially most of the times you're working with a new team, and everybody needs to figure out how each other are working. So basically you check in with all the departments as much as you can all the time, making sure everybody's doing well, everything is going well, the actors are coming on time, the crew is there, and the food is ready, for sure. That's a really important issue. And the food is nice is also a really important thing, so everybody's happy. So the first couple of days are really the big test of what you as a producer can foresee later on. Of course you never know if somebody comes and claims that that's their junkyard or whatever, but hopefully you would know from
With a
pre-production.
shotgun. With a shotgun. I wish I was lying.
Yeah. Hopefully you would have that location release and stuff like that lined up, but whatever
That's
happens.
one of those pre-production things, the location release.
But I would say, yeah, the first couple of days of the shoots, keep them as light as possible and make sure everybody's doing good, and then hopefully you'll have a good 4 to 6 weeks ahead of you after that.
All my stuff is documentary style, which is completely different. What I stress out about on the first day, the crews I work with are very small. I make sure my directions are clear. I make a production book in addition to a call sheet. I crop maps. I make sure that the food is going to be great. I check in with everyone and have them verify receipt of the email. I'm always the first to arrive on set. I think it's important to thank every single person at the end of the day. Producers should be the first to arrive, the last to leave, and anticipate any problems that are going to happen. I shot in Griffith Park. I had no idea that the Greek Theater was going to have a concert that evening and that you can hear it because the mountains echo up. I had no way of knowing that. And it took so long for me to get a permit to shoot there that it was the day before the shoot, and I'd been following up for 2 weeks in the Parks and Recreation office. Yeah, you'll get it, it's fine. I was sick to my stomach. I had no other option but to shoot there and go for it. And I just hustled everyone as fast as I could because it wasn't just the concert, there was a load-in and random sound checks. Mm-hmm. So there's just some things that you're gonna, you do your best. You just have to problem solve and think on your feet and keep your spirits up. As a producer, you can't show that you're panicked out of your mind because it just sets the tone for everyone. And it worked out great. And the food was good and everyone's spirits were kept high.
You laugh, but you guys know, you've been on sets, food's important.
Yeah.
That'll change a day right
Have
there.
a treat. Don't give people a bunch of sugar in the morning. Like keep it lighter, like sugar at the end of the day and caffeine so they can ramp up. I mean, you're controlling kind of how their energy level for the day. And if someone is like hooked on donuts and Diet Coke in the morning and they want to take a nap by the afternoon, like you're jacked. You need that person. I don't know if that's helpful. That's my answer,
shooting in
though.
the South is hard with keeping to a diet. I'll just say that. We had some actresses at the end. They were like, "Man, I think I'm putting on some pounds," because for a month you're eating good Southern food, Southern fried food. So, that food is very important and very difficult to manage depending on where you are.
No, I think listening to you guys, it just reminds me of how important keeping morale up is, part of my job. And I've had all kinds of calamities happen on my sets. The first film I shot, the second day was September 11th. We were shooting New York City. The second film I shot, all kinds of crazy things. The executive producer was embezzling money from our production, We were shooting in Detroit, and we were on 7 Mile, and I remember and 7 Mile makes 8 Mile look like Disneyland. And we were in this strip club in 7 Mile, and all the guys came around me and started, they were trying to extort more money from me. They locked all of our trucks in their parking lot. The third film I produced, it's called The Motel, and the motel that we were shooting at caught on fire on the third day. So literally your job as a producer is to put out fires, literally. That's I just stand around and wait for something really horrible to happen, and then everybody's like, "Where's Karin?" And they come and find me. I mean, I would say, barring some kind of disaster, which I just expect to happen now. The most important thing is really keeping morale up, and a big part of that is on the first few days, like just try to make your days. If you can make your days, which means you shoot everything that's scheduled on the call sheet, that's a huge morale booster. The other thing would be not to go into overtime, because if you're going into overtime on the first or second day, that's one, you're in trouble, and two, that's just not a good sign for the crew. And you're running a marathon on a feature. It's by the end of it, hopefully your crew will have bonded and carry each other through it, but it's just a long process.
Right. And I assume that you had insurance. Insurance is one of those things we didn't talk about for pre-production, but that's why you set it up in the beginning for those very calamities.
But even that, I mean, like when we were shooting, we had an issue. Our first film, we were shooting in the middle of Arkansas, and it was our first AC, and our DP got there, and they're building the camera, getting the red camera set up and whatnot, and it's not working. The card reader wasn't working, and I mean, what are we gonna do? We're literally start rolling tomorrow, and we already have a tight schedule, and we're in the middle of Arkansas. It's not like we're in LA where we can go to another shop and swap it out. Like, we were literally figuring out, putting out fires, right? Like, well, we have an HVX here, maybe we can do, just trying to figure out and make it work. And they're all, freaked out, and I saw the piece sort of laying out, and I just looked at it, and I could see like the prongs were all weird, so I just kind of took like a pin and was fixing all these things and straightening them out, and then it worked. It worked, and the camera worked, and it was enough it was going to take us like 3 or 4 days to get the new one in, or the new body, or whatever the part was. I can't remember. But, these guys were like calling it. They were calling it. They were like, well, we can't shoot, or we're going to have to, who's got an iPhone? It's like, what are you going to do? We're in the middle of nowhere. So, yeah, it really is just being on your toes, and you can't prep for that. You can't prep for September 11th. You can't prep for them locking up your vans or whatever. And you really have to be a person that can take it in stride, right, and not show them that you're freaking out, because
I don't know that I could take that in stride.
that's crazy. That's crazy. That's insane that you had to deal with that. But a lot of it, you have to be well, move well on your toes for sure.
And I'm curious, just during production, what's your process of keeping an eye on the budget and the cash flow?
Well, in features, there's usually what's called a cost report meeting every Friday. That's the producer, line producer, accountant. Usually the accountant comes to set. It's the only time sometimes. And you sit down and you look at your budget, and you looked at how much you've spent for every line item of your budget. You look at how much money you have left. Sometimes we're way over on gas, so we're going to have to take some money away from, hopefully it's not catering, but away from, a lot of times it comes out of post-production.
Yeah,
so
post.
you're just constantly moving money around during those cost report meetings. And also I like to actually require that I sign off on every single request. So every petty cash request, every check request, every purchase order, I sign off on it. So I actually try and keep those numbers in my head. So when I'm at the cost report meeting, I'm not surprised if we're way over on a certain budget line.
When you don't have a lot of money, it's easy. You keep track of that very, very, very easily. Trust me. That's what I got.
We shot outside of Nashville in the middle of nowhere. The directors, Sarah Lamb and Mary Wigmore, were the only two people who went on the shoot. And it's a former commune. There's no place to spend money. Basically, it's $45 a night to sleep there, and it includes 3 meals. There's a local store. Sarah owned the camera. Mary shot it. All the interviews were set up ahead of time. They knew they were there for 5 days. And we had, a finite amount of money. So it's so easy to keep it in check on that tiny level as opposed to, the larger productions. And then the other stuff I've worked on, it's a 2-day shoot, so you know right away what's happening. I know, I plug it into my Excel spreadsheet and it's a no. It's like 48 hours of like, no, we can't do that.
Does not compute. To add to what I said too, and I don't know, it may be different, but for me, I also wasn't in charge of the money. Like my other producing partner was in charge of the money. There were three of us. You had the producer who was the writer-director, so he's the creative, right? And then you had the money guy, and then I was sort of in the middle balancing and keeping each other, keeping them all at bay. But so he really handled that, and we would check in obviously and make sure we're doing all right and whatnot. But yeah, so that I had a million responsibilities, so money was not one that I wanted to specifically deal with. I wasn't responsible for getting it. I'll spend it, but other than that, he was tracking everything. He did a great job with that.
Great, thanks. So let's pay a little bit of attention to post-production. So you've got it in the can, and so to speak, it's not a can anymore, it's on disc. So you've got it, and what are the primary things that you're trying to hold in your head at that point for post-production?
What can we get for free and where can we get it?
And why is that? Is that because post inevitably gets the short end of the stick, you think? Or?
It's super expensive, and in documentary, you're not on a set schedule. Maybe you're trying to make a film festival deadline, but for color correct, like if you have relationships and you can slip in places, sometimes you'll get deals. It's not a set schedule like it is a narrative. So yeah. It was about what we could get for free and where we could get it, because we were out of money by that point. And there was, I think, 150 hours of footage.
For us, we actually locked in our whole post-sound team before Cass was even brought on, aside from me, before Cass was brought on board. And that actually ended up, it was something I learned too. It was something that excited a lot of the other crew that would be on set filming, because, like, for instance, our sound mixer, we had an awesome sound mixer. He's my go-to guy now. I use him for everything, and we're great friends. But he was excited, after I had the conversation with him and we brought him on board, and I said, I'll put you in touch with the post guys, and that way you guys can coordinate. I don't know what you need to coordinate, but I'm assuming it'd be nice to talk, right? And he was blown away, because he had done so many other projects where they just used his on-set, sound recording, and they didn't do much to it, and we didn't understand how that was possible. But he came to set so excited, knowing that somebody was going to manipulate and use what he had beyond just what he recorded. So a lot of our post team was in place before. Like our editor was also our first AD on set. And it was really small pool of people. We assembled those, assembled that from the start. Our composer did the little teaser trailer that I mentioned that we did. So he was on board, and luckily we had a lot of those people that were just ready to jump and go for it. And again, it goes back to the passion. They were excited about the project, and they were excited about working with us. They really believed in us, and we believed in them, and we've continued to grow with each other. A lot of our team we used time and time again, and we thought we pulled a lot of favors, and we didn't, we weren't going to be able to pull those again. And they came to us asking to work on the next film, which I think said a lot about what we did with the first one.
I have an addendum. We did a Kickstarter campaign, and we went out for post, and we tried to raise $50,000, and we raised $84,000. So that got us
Impressive.
through. That's all.
We're just admiring
True
that.
story.
Yeah.
84,000, yes.
I would say, to answer your question, once you get in the can, the only thing that I'm hoping for is that we got it, that it's there, and almost always we didn't. And there's almost always a first-time director would be like, please, I want to do a reshoot. I want 2 days, or I'll pay for it myself, or my husband will pay for it or something. And they're just begging, because you're never going to get everything that you wrote on the screenplay. So when you're in the editing process, editing is really like rewriting. So you just hope that you have enough to make the story work. And in terms of, I would agree with Kate that we're producers are really just trying to hustle and get stuff for free, because post ends basically when you run out of money. That's when post-production ends. Or, you know, it doesn't end even when you're at the festival premiere, because usually the director's watching. I had one director watch the film premiere, and the first thing she said at the Q&A was, "Oh yeah, I want to re-edit that." You know, so I mean, they're not even done, and it's really the only way to stop them is to run out of money. And then, you know, on the vendor deal, you know, you're hoping to get some good vendor deals and build the relationships and things like that.
Nina, do you have any?
Well, I don't think I've ever, I mean, I've tried to run out of money for sure, but I've never started a project where I didn't have a specific idea of where to go with post. I've never been, I think I've been too much a control freak to wanting to go into a project without knowing that it's actually going to finish. And that would be my biggest scare, to not know with all that work that you've done for such a long time, and if it's not going to go anywhere. I mean, even if your post is your best friend and her Avid in the garage, that's fine. But as long as you know and you have the plan of here is where we're going to do this and here is where we're going to do that, and yes, you will scramble and you will try to get people to give you donations and all kinds of stuff, but at least you know that you will finish, and it's very true. You can keep going. I mean, basically, you can keep being in post forever, but at a certain point, you just have to say no. It's over, and it's true. The best argument is we have no more money.
Can you guys speak to the importance of the editor? This is one of my new pet peeves from a recent experience. How you worked with the editor and chose the editor, and that's one of the people that you actually end up working with the longest, no matter what your budget. So if I could just hear your experiences with that.
Should I go? The editor on our documentary was Kate Amend, and she had several Academy Award nominated films, and the directors wanted her. That's who they wanted. They just felt that connection. So we waited for her. She was on another film. We waited for her for a bit, and I think we edited for 10 months, and it was just the directors in the room with her. I saw, you know, a cut like months into the process, but it was mainly just those two directors spending time with Kate, and they had a fantastic relationship. And I think it goes back to, you know, you're creating your family, and hopefully your family's not too dysfunctional, you know, or you have an opportunity to pick another one that's not. But that relationship, you know, it made the film. She did a great job.
Our editor, just like why I got into producing was like I have a pool of friends and I want to keep busy, you know, and these guys, as the writer, director, and the producer, that's what they did. You know, they had a bunch of guys they went to film school with, and one of their good friends was an editor as well. His name was Levi Blue, and so he edited our film, and he and the director did a first pass or what have you, and I, you know, we kind of started to gauge that they, you know, a lot of producing is managing egos and personalities, like from my experience. You know, you have to be able to listen and understand and speak different languages to different people. You know, everybody comes from a different place, and they were not getting on. You know, it wasn't fully functioning. You know, so they got through their cut, and then Daniel and myself we would come in. We were always a part of the process, but they had their first cut, and then it was basically the four of us, you know, which sounds overwhelming, right? Too many cooks in the kitchen, but it really wasn't. Like, it's very harmonious for us, you know? Like, I have my focus that I'm looking at. I'm looking at performance. I'm looking at the story. Are we overtelling the story? Did we say that already, you know? The director obviously is wanting to make sure he gets everything that he had on the page, and the producer's like, that's going to cost too much to color correct, or that's going to, you know, we don't have special effects for that, or whatever it is. So we each, you know, it was sort of unanimous, you know. There were times where I sort of made a suggestion and the other two guys really didn't, you know, it wasn't what they wanted, and we moved forward. But we understood that was how it was going to go. And there were times where that would happen with the director, where the other producer and I were like, yeah, but we really, you know, we think you're just you just know what's there, and an audience isn't going to be worrying about that baggage, you know. So, and that works for us. That works for us. We just you know, we all worked well in the editor. I think it helped having all three of us in there. With him, and then he ended up working on our feature as well. And our producer, our second feature, our other producer, Daniel Dunn, ended up editing the film with him. They worked together, and they really, you know, took that first cut, and it's the film that lives now. And so I think, you know, being really, like you said, it's sort of like a rewrite. You know, it really is. You know, you write one film, you shoot one film, you edit one film, right? And then it's a great part of the process, I think, in my opinion, because you create moments, and sometimes it's, you know, like you said, if you didn't shoot it and you didn't get that, you know, sometimes you have to be creative in post, you know, through sound or editing or what you can do. And when you shoot on a location that's very specific, we can't go back and do pickups because we have no money to get back to Arkansas, and LA doesn't look like that, you know? So you really have to make sure you know, limitation sort of breeds creativity.
Yeah, your editor is one of the most, like everybody else, a key person. And I think the way we did the story of Luke, we were shooting in Canada in the middle of nowhere, and every second, third day we sent the material to LA to our editor. So he was assembling, he and the assistant was assembling everything. So when we came back from Canada, he basically had a film ready, which was an assembly of the movie, but also he had done his cut of it, and he had made some choices already. And he could do that because he and the director already knew each other very well. They trust each other very well. So there was a couple of scenes where the director said, I would like to go back and look at some of the other takes, but in general, he agreed. And as soon as we were back in LA, he could go into the editing room and start working with him. And I think that's, I mean, for a producer at least, and the timetable that you're looking at, it saved us a lot. That we could come back and the film was put together. It was very exciting for us to see as well, that you worked so long on this project and you actually see it coming together, and you see where it's definitely not coming together and where it really worked on paper, but not really when you see it. So exactly like you said, that's when you really have to be creative and figure out, well, what do we do now? And that's also where you have to do all your kill your darlings and have to suffer through a lot of painful situations and have to deal with a lot of stuff. But it's all very creative, and it's fun because you're sitting with your baby and it's getting together and it's almost ready to get out in the real world. So I think it's one of the most exciting times of making your movie.
I have a very different experience on my features where it's like, I would say that post-production, contrary to popular belief, is by far the hardest part of the whole process. Like almost, perhaps every film I've produced has almost fallen apart during post-production. And I've always really I've thought about this a lot, like, why does this happen, you know? And I think that it's, you know, in pre-production, it's like, it's all this anticipation and you're getting ready. It's like planning a vacation, right? Like you're super excited. Then in production, like everybody's on adrenaline and there's 50 people on set or 100 people on set and you're all working together, you know, to accomplish this goal. And then when you get to post-production, it's like, it's the director, it's the producer and the editor and the footage, and that's it. And it's the three of you sitting in a room with what you don't have, like thinking about all the, you know, and then still recovering from the trauma of the shoot, usually, you know. And so at some point, you know, on almost every feature I've had the director and the editor stop talking, or the director and the producer stop talking, or the editors and the producer stop talking. And if you don't communicate, it's just the three of you. If you don't communicate, it makes for a very difficult editing process. And I've literally had, on last year, on the last film I produced, I was actually in the hospital room, not for myself, but for a family member. And I had the director on one phone, then I had the editor on another phone, screaming at each other, like through me, like through my, you know, and it was just horrible. It was horrible. But, you know, I hate to say, it's just like people care so much about the film. So I guess that's a good thing. They're very passionate. But you really come face to face with what you have.
Wow. That's great. Thank you guys for those anecdotes. we have some questions. And I'm just going to start off with a few here. I think this one is a very clear one. Should you create a DBA for your production company or an LLC, or create an LLC for each project?
I'll answer that. I mean, an LLC is a limited liability corporation, and it's actually a very new legal entity just in the last 10 or 15 years. The purpose of creating a company is for liability protection. It's really to protect the partners or the owners and your investors of that company. So let's say you have one production company and you produce 3 films. Well, under that one company, if the investors of one film, you've exposed them to the liability of the other 2 projects, right? So you want to create a separate legal entity to protect the owners and the investors of each film. So then the question really becomes, well, do you create an LLP, which is a partnership? And a partnership offers almost no legal protection. Almost always it flows straight to the partners. An LLC, which provides some legal protection, it's a compromise between a partnership and a corporation. And then, or you can create a corporation. And a lot of producers will either create what's called a corporation Chapter C, or Chapter S, I'm sorry, it's a S Corp, or they create an LLC. And I think you have to take into account, okay, well, what are the taxes like? In New York City, annual franchise taxes for an LLC is $25, but in California, it's $800, right? So you got to look into, yeah, you got to look into the different costs, So there's different considerations that you want to consult with your lawyer.
Yeah, and then because I have several LLCs going right now, you have to pay to have the taxes done for it. So there's a fee for that. And the $800 is every calendar year that it's open. So I usually advise people to wait until they really are solid, they think they're going to get their financing, and then create. To go to that trouble.
You don't need to start your LLC until you actually have money ready to be put into the bank. Because remember, the LLC is really for liability protection, so you don't need the legal protection until the money starts to get invested. And as producers, at least in New York, we do this, but we budget in 3 years of tax returns into the production budget. So it's part of your negative cost. That includes the 3 years of the annual tax fees, whether it's $25 or $800. And it includes the tax preparation cost, $500 to $1,000 a year. And in New York, you have to do something that's called publishing, which means you have to publish in the local paper that you started in an LLC. Well, what's the local paper in New York? It's the New York Times. It's really expensive to publish anything in the New York Times, so you budget about $2,500 for that. A little bit less if you're in Brooklyn. So again, it's all these costs. It's all these costs, that you put into your production budget for the negative cost of the film.
Here's one specifically, is because Kate mentioned this, but I think you all have experience with this. How much money are you aiming to raise via product placement? And can you talk about the process and what is possible with product placement? You brought it up. I do remember it.
For the film coming up, we don't have paperwork in place yet, so I can't say who it is, but we're hoping it's $50,000, and it's clean. They give us $50,000. We have someone display on her arm, perhaps, like X, whatever it is. So that's a start. Then we're also, as part of the script, there's a big party scene, so we might build that around a particular car, and we're hoping that we can have, a car like Audi or someone give us money for that. So, maybe it would be, I don't know, 10% of the budget, maybe, something like that. I don't know, as much as we can. We'll take as much as we can get, as long as, we don't have to give up anything in return, and then if we do, we'll weigh that against whether or not it's worth it.
For us, I'm not sure this is answering that question, but we had 2 clothing companies who basically were responsible for all the outfits, the shirts. that the all the leads wore in the movie. And then we had he's an artist in New York, and he does it's called Punk Your Chucks. He does basically custom design on like sneakers and shoes or shirts and anything. So he had heard about our film when we were, you know, in the beginning pre-production phase and, you know, all over these websites, and reached out to us, and he donated a pair of shoes that one of the characters wore, and then he painted a bag for me that I ended up using in the movie as well. But we didn't really plan for any of that. Like, it was just like, oh, good, now we don't have to spend this money on wardrobe, you know, went to post.
So it was more in-kind.
Yeah, I mean, they just, you know,
rather
they
than
were very
actual cash coming in.
generous and wanted to have their, you know, give us some stuff, and they gave clothes to our crew as well, so all our crew was rocking their gear, and, you know, it wasn't even necessarily about, we didn't have any, they didn't have to be featured or seen or anything, they didn't care, it was they were really generous about that, and but it just saved us a lot of money, you know, especially on a horror film when you need, you know, 5 or 6 shirts of each to do gross things, you know. So yeah, that was sort of the one thing I guess I can sort of chime in that vein.
Yeah, I would just clarify that, you know, for independent films, product placement usually is almost always in kind, meaning they donate product to you, and instead of getting cash for it. That's getting cash for product placement is really a studio thing, because if you think about it, product placement is advertising, or it's branding, or it's marketing. So the corporations are looking for a count as to how many eyeballs are going to see their product in this movie. And for me, producing foreign language, independent, character-driven dramas, right, I can't guarantee them anybody's, you know, more than 1,000 people are going to see it. So there's no way they're going to offer me their product for cash. But if I ask really nicely, you know, they a lot of times offer product. And as a producer, after you do a certain number of movies, you get to realize, oh, okay, well, Kiehl's will almost always give you product. And that's great, because you can put that product in the actors' trailers, for example. You know, so there's certain...
Gift bags.
Gift bags, exactly. And so there's certain brands that almost always product place. You know, a couple times we were able to get an Apple computer product place as our edit station, you know, so those things are really helpful. But in the end, the in-kind rarely adds up to more than $10,000.
Yeah, it's pretty much the same experience I've had. We've had a lot of in-kind stuff going on, but I've never done a project where they paid for us to use anything. And then, of course, you've got to make sure that you have everything cleared with whatever brand that's being shown, so you don't get in trouble later on. A lot of businesses obviously can be very sensitive if you, in the middle of a slasher movie, show a Starbucks cup or something. I mean, you got to make sure that those things are cleared before you send the movie out anywhere, so you don't get in legal trouble later on.
Great. So next question. Do you have a distribution agreement in place to help get financing? If not, did it make it more difficult to get financing?
You mean pre-sale?
Well, distribution agreement, I think you could interpret it widely as pre-sale, or, I mean, they're so rare these days. I don't think I would know how to spot that bird if I saw it.
I know. I remember speaking to a company when we were, it was on Madison County when we were taking meetings, and that sort of came up, you know, especially for our film. We built it as a franchise. It wasn't, you know, like, we're like, well, let's see how this does and resurrect the killer and do another one, you know, like it was always part of the plan. So when we went in, we were pitching it as such. And so that was one of the things we brought up, you know, not really knowing, like you said, that it's changed that much. So we're just asking, you know, what's the plan for a sequel and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, they kind of, in their way, told us how they manage that. And, yeah, and some pre-sale, you know, or it's almost as if they're saying, you can put your name on our film, but really we're not going to promise money. And if we don't like it, we're not going to take it. You know, like it doesn't really... They're not giving cash out up front so you can go make your film. Like that hasn't been my experience, and I know tons of, you know, at least, you know, other independent producers that I've asked, you know, and if that has happened, and I think that day is long gone.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, that's really the studio model where the distributor pays for the making of the film. On the indie side, it used to happen actually kind of in the heyday of indies, and it's called a negative pickup. And that's when the distributor, or, you know, like let's say it's Lionsgate, they agree to distribute your film and they pick up the negative costs of the film. But the producers still have to front that cost. So you take the paper, the distribution agreement to the bank, and you get a loan for $5 million. Then the lawyers and the banks take $500,000 of that. So you have $4.5 million to make your film. Make the film, you deliver it to Lionsgate, and then they pay off the bank loan. So that's a negative pickup. And that used to be a very common arrangement in indie films, and it rarely happens anymore. Pre-sales also are pretty rare, especially for indies. What actually helps with financing is if you do have a foreign sales agent on board. So you have a sales agent on board, what you get from them are the sales estimates. And they give you low, medium, and high. And they'll tell you how much money they think your film will make in X territories and how much that totals. And you can take those foreign sales estimates to your investors to prove, like, well, even at the lowest, we'll make $400,000. Or if we aim high, we'll make $3 million. You know, and that piece of paper is incredibly helpful for raising equity financing.
And that's not gospel, just if any of you are planning to do that, like, it's hypothetical for sure, you know, and we've had it happen so many times, and it's, you know, so just make sure your investors don't think, well, they said we're going to make $50,000 for Germany, you know what I mean, because it's not a promise by any means.
Great. We have an online question. If you're working on a self-produced production and filming is complete except for a couple of scenes due to cost, where or when would it be appropriate to seek additional outside funding for that, to do the big scenes? I'm thinking about Kate, the model you had earlier, saying that you were going to save the big scenes for the end.
I'm thinking about Karin and that she'll really know how to answer this.
So, and the follow-up to this, is it acceptable to piece together a short version or a teaser of your production to shop around to encourage investment for those bigger pieces?
I can answer that part, actually. Well, what we're doing is we're going to launch crowdfunding. We're not doing Kickstarter. We're doing another one called Fund Anything. And we're shooting a teaser for that, which we're going to send out the script simultaneously when we launch the campaign, along with the teaser, in hopes that our crowdfunding is going really well and we show investors, look, we've made X amount in 48 hours or whatever it is. And then if we make nothing on the crowdfunding, then we won't show that to investors, obviously. But it will show that this director who's worked before is talented and what the tone of the film is. And does that answer the question? Did I answer it? Okay.
Yeah.
And you have to basically, you know, when we start shooting, we know that we're going to have to end and you have to have a movie. So we wouldn't start and know that we have 2 scenes that we're going to like save up for to shoot, you know, next year, whatever it is. Like, you know, when we shoot, we're going to shoot it.
Yeah, that's hard. I mean, as an actor, I've been on, I want to say, those sets where you get that they're like, okay, we'll call you in 3 weeks when you figure it out. And you're like, they ran out of money. That's what it was, you know, and at least from my experience, I mean, yeah, I mean, it's such a headache to go through all this stuff and get all this stuff together that it's like, for me, I want to know we're going to finish, you know, I mean, obviously things happen and, you know, you have to be flexible with life, but, you know, I personally would never go into something saying, okay, we can make it through the first 3 weeks, or, you know, personally, I want to know I have money for post, like she said, otherwise, you know, it's all for nothing, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I do think the producer has a responsibility to have a vision of how this can actually be completed once they start. And I think I've heard that in many different responses from you guys. So
to answer that question, just because I think they're specifically, however you got to get it, you better get that money and finish. That's the best way I can answer that. I don't know. I mean, yeah, crowdfunding, cut a trailer, cut a teaser, do whatever you have to do. There's not one thing that works for everybody. You know, it's unique. That's what's fun, and that's what makes it exciting. You know, if it was the same, we'd all be doing it. Nobody's having fun. So just make it work. You know, make it work. Find a way to do it, and you know, whatever you have to do to get through it. I mean, that's the answer pretty much.
The one thing I will say is if you run out of money, there's a lot of times you can get finishing funds, and there are a few grants that are specifically to finish your film, especially for documentary, but even for narrative. The problem is there's only like 3 of them for narrative. So there's something called last money in, first money out, and this is money that comes in when let's say you have a rough cut and you've run out of money and you need the money to finish post because you got this festival lined up and you got to finish your movie. So you're in what I would say is a very vulnerable position financially. As a producer, you try never to back yourself into this corner because the money that's out there, they know that you need the money no matter what. And they know that you are in a very desperate position. So they ask for terms called last money in, where the last money to come into your project and where the first money to come out, which means as soon as you make a dime, that money comes to us. And that's really, really unfair, unfortunately, to your original investors, because those are the people who took the biggest risk with you before you even made the film. Right now you have the film in the can, you have something to see, so it's a very low risk that the finishing fund equity investors are taking. So what I usually recommend is instead of going to the last money in, first money out, I recommend going back to your original investors and say, look, I need another 50,000, there's 5 of you, would you guys consider putting up another 10,000? Or maybe would you consider giving us a loan? And the investors will almost always say yes because they don't want anyone else's money to sit in front of theirs. And they have a huge investment. Probably by now it's been at least a year, maybe 2, 3, or 5. So they have a huge investment in getting this film out there. So that's what I would recommend.
Great. Let's see, I think we have time for 1 or 2 more questions. So when you want to self-produce with a limited budget, how do you source free equipment and entice other technical people to get involved?
All the secrets.
One more plug for crowdfunding. People give you money. It's interesting because people show up for you who you would never expect, and then the ones who you book on bail and are not there. But it's all friends, it's all connections. You know, make your film. Do whatever you have to do to make your film. And if that is shooting it on a 5D and you don't have the money for a 5D, do Kickstarter, Indiegogo, Fund Anything, Seed and Spark. Use one of those entities to raise $5,000, get a full camera package, find a DP who wants a feature credit. You're actors, so you're probably going to be in it. You know actors. You draw on your community of support. You shoot at free locations. You shoot for a limited period of time, maybe 14 days. I don't know if it's going to be improv or a full script, but find people who know what they're doing and call on them for advice. I mean, independent film is, it's a pretty strong community, and people help each other with legal agreements and advice and panels, and you just do what you can to get it made.
Yeah, everybody's helped somebody or been helped, from my experience. So I don't know. For me, I always like to think, just be generous. Be generous with people. Passion goes a long way. People sense that, and they want to work with people that they believe in, but also just good people, right? If you don't come across like a used car salesman, people are going to want to work with you. But I love that you mentioned working with finding good people. I come from a sports background, and I was always of the mindset of finding a team that was I didn't want to be the best person on the team because I wanted to continue to challenge myself to be, to keep climbing those ranks. And I do that when I started producing, because I realized as an actor, producing, gives me the flexibility to create my own content, but moreover, work with people, work with better people, than I've been able to work with, let's say, or the director that I haven't had a chance to work with, or other actors or crew, whatever it is. So I would always challenge my guys to shoot higher. And that was one thing that I learned and to this day continue to push for is not saying no for people. Because a lot of the time, my 2 guys, we had an effects team on board who's like an A-list effects company for Madison County, and they didn't want to take the meeting with him, and they were nervous. And I was like, no, man, we're going to take this meeting. At the very least, we'll get to meet him, and he gets to meet us. Know your worth. And we went in, and we were just going to borrow a life cast of an actor that he had for $100 or whatever. And when we went in, he requested the script from me, and I was like, okay, I sent it in. And when we went in, his script was outlined. There were Post-its all over, highlighting and all this stuff. And he's like, this is what I want to do. I want to amp these up, this and this and this. And they're looking at me like, what's going on, you know? And he volunteered his services to come on board, and we did not have money for him. Like, you know, we could barely afford his life cast, you know? And I mean, the mask that we use in the movie from his, you know, studio would run us about 20, 30 grand, you know? And at the end, I'm getting kicks under the table left and right, and they're like, what's going on? And I'm like, and I look at the money guy, and I'm like, you better say something. And finally, he levels with him, and he says, look, don't worry about it. Save this much. I want to do this. I like working with you guys or whatever. But if I would have let them say no, we would have never had that experience. And that was the one thing that led to so many great things. I mean, that's why we were on all the horror websites, everything, because we could then promote it. And he was very generous with us, saying, use my name, go for it. You know, I was a young horror director too. I know what that's like. So don't say no for people. Always aim for you know, the stars, you know, and you'll get people. You'll be surprised, and people will want to work with you. And like I said, it's karma. People have been helped, and they want to help people, you know, and you'll find those people that are drawn to that.
Find crew who want a credit bump. So they're at the level below, they need that DP credit or whatever it is, and those are the people.
Yeah, I think in general in this town, it's definitely possible to find people, good people to work with. There's a lot of people out there, and you never know who's going to be your next greatest partner on your project. Also, it's definitely possible to make a project for almost nothing. As I mentioned earlier, the Untitled Fiction project that I did with my director, we did it for less to nothing. We had the camera, basically. We worked with the lights wherever we were. We worked with all our friends' places where they lived. So those kind of things that cost a lot of money for locations. We made the whole series based on friends' favors. And it was possible. It's tough, and it took months and months and months. It took a lot longer than you would do your feature shoot, but that's how it is. But we got it done, and we had fun with it. So it was a very different experience, but it was a very good one because we met a ton of really great people through that process.
Great. One last question, which I think is kind of building off of what you're talking about there. Were you signatory to SAG for the webisodes? Yes. And so did you do the new media contract? Yes. Could you talk a little bit about that? Because I think some of the things we've been talking about during the panel, we've all assumed that we're working under short film theatrical or feature film theatrical, or Kate does documentaries. But if you could talk about that, because I think it's a great contract that helps producers and actors alike, and it's a way to really go out there and make things.
I mean, I have to say with the Untitled Fiction project, it's very much of a labor of love in any way. We had an outline for the story, and we met with the actors. The director met with the actors, pitched the idea. It was basically unscripted, so everybody had to be on board with, you know, being part of developing their characters. And in that sense, it was really fun for us because it was such an experimental thing to do that each actor basically, first of all, they picked their name, and then they start talking about what kind of person they were. But each scene that we shot, which led to the other one, had an outline. So they basically knew we go from A to B, what happens within there, it's up to you. And it became a very organic thing, but I guess it could have gone crazy, but I guess it went really well. The thing with the new media agreement is that we could make the arrangement with all the actors, including non-SAG actors, to sign up for the project and be part of it in the sense that which was very little cost that we put in already, then we'll share it equally compared to the amount of time that they put in. Everybody was on the same rate, so it was a favored nation deal that we did across the board. And that goes for both us that work behind the camera and the people in front of the camera. So you can do that with that agreement. You can basically do, I guess, whatever you want to do. But for us, since this was really a very equal way for everybody, put in the same amount of time, the same amount of energy all throughout the project, then it's a pretty even deal that we made with everyone. And that was amazing that we were able to do that. If we didn't have that agreement, I don't know how we would have done it.
We did that as well, and we had a SAG-AFTRA Gil Bellows, so we had to go through SAG, which at that point in time I was actually really afraid of, and the new media contract they were so helpful. It was great. I mean, the one thing to be mindful of is that it's a lot of paperwork, and it's paperwork that needs to be filled out before, during, and after, and it's very specific. So you need to know where you need signatures and from whom, but it was very easy to comply with.
Yeah, I just as recently as last week put through the same thing. Yeah, pretty recent. My fiancée is an actress, writer, director, and she had an idea to spoof one of her favorite television shows, Once Upon a Time, and so we started working on that, and we went through the same thing, SAG New Media, and it is a lot of work. It is a lot of paperwork. I mean, to get that going, but by the end of it, I was like, wow, this really isn't a lot, and it's great because you have to fill out some forms, and then we can all be creating our own content. And especially for the web, it's, like she said, you don't need a lot of money to do it. And we talked about the social media that you can use to promote it. It's a very accessible thing for us to do. So it's incredible that SAG now offers that for us to use the same talent, that we would want to use. But yeah, I mean, it's been really great, and yeah, they've been very helpful. Because believe me, there were a couple things where I was really confused, but they're available and easy to reach and all that good stuff.
Great. Well, thank you. I think we're out of time. Thank you, all of the panelists. Thanks, the audience. Thanks for great questions.
Thanks, Kelly.